What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at SoundHound AI stock, ticker symbol SOUN, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Wednesday, March 13th. Alright guys, a monster day here for SoundHound stock. It is up 95 cents a share. That is plus 15.89% in regular trading hours. It's up about another 12 cents or so after hours. Listen, you'll hear me say this a lot. After hours, we have to take it with a grain of salt because volume is so low. However, of course, it is the real price, so there's nothing wrong with the price. It's just getting there on low volume. The real test, by the way, this goes for whether it's up or down. It's just easy to get pushed around. The real test is market open the following day. But again, you know, if I'm a bull on SoundHound stock right now, I prefer it's up rather than flat or down. Okay, so let's move on here and take a look, starting with our daily ritual, the volume profile analysis here on the 5-minute chart. This can help us gain a little bit of insight into, okay, was there potentially any big sample size bias that was very obvious in the market today that we maybe didn't get out of the move in price alone? Now, by the way, guys, SoundHound stock was today's winner for today's wild card stock for the second day in a row. I think for good reason here today. You guys voted on it last night, as well as throughout the day today. I always count up the votes right before I start recording. So while you're listening, I promise you won't miss anything I'll explain very well. Please head down to the comment section and cast your ticker vote for tomorrow, Wednesday's in-play stock. Whichever ticker gets the most votes on today's batch of videos, I will cover for tomorrow. Or more so, I'll cover it tomorrow for Thursday. Okay, thanks for voting. Let's take a look. Now, in order to pull any bias out of the market that we can, I'm looking for obvious changes in stock price that correlate with obvious moves in stock, obvious changes in volume that correlate with obvious moves in stock price. But the part that I think a lot of people miss, we have to look at this through the lens of, okay, is that already contextual for that time of day? Do we already expect that time of day? Because if we do, then it's not out of the ordinary. It really doesn't give us any insight into the bias at that particular moment. Doesn't really help us, does it? So let's look here. For me, the most obvious moves that I'm interested in are going to be this upside move here, okay, compared with the fade to follow. I'm interested in this little push that we got a little bit, afternoon or so. And that's really about it, though I am going to include this green candle in this move because I'm really comparing this move to the surrounding volume. Just so you're aware of what I'm looking at contextually. All right, now let's take a look at the volume profile, starting from left to right. If we take a look, you can see here that candle I just pointed out, we did see a big increase in volume. Now, honestly, most days on most stocks, you are going to see that opening candle be the biggest volume candle of the day. As of late, SoundHound has been a little bit different in that regard. We haven't really consistently seen that, but this green candle, you guys know I like to see 3 or 4 consecutive candles that really kind of blow the other volume, not necessarily out of the water, but are clear and contextual, or out of context, I should say. Contextual for what we're looking for, out of context for what a normal day might look like. And while that looks really great, here, again, I need consecutive, at least a couple, minimum, consecutive candles. That one-off style of candle for me is not definitive enough. There's just too much randomness that could potentially be involved. We could have just seen a battle of buyers and sellers, though it was a relatively strong green bar. I'll give the bulls that. But the truth is, to stay as unbiased as possible, we have to look at this in a way that's actually meaningful, not just that helps us feel good about our positioning. That's ridiculous. Now, this upside move, and really I'm interested in kind of the second half of that upside move as we pushed higher and higher. What we did get was 5 consecutive green bars in a row, and about 40%, if not maybe 50% of those bars, if you kind of average one together, it was a little bit out of context for what was expected. Now, this to me, it's not perfect. It's a little sloppy, but the market's never going to, it's almost never perfect, right? So this to me is definitive enough to say, okay, it's pretty clear that in this moment in the market, the sample size, a bigger sample size of the market was looking at SoundHound and saying, it belongs higher, okay? And we're going to continue to offer up and push this thing higher because it's worth doing so, at least short term, right? This is like the market, the free market talking, okay? Now, again, by the way, if you missed it today, SoundHound is up nearly 16%. A lot of the AI sector today is up. Of course, last night we got Oracle earnings, a little bit of a surprise upside beat. Clearly showed demand for AI, is still growing, which as if we didn't know that. But good news nonetheless, and it pumped a lot of these names here today. SoundHound was no exception. The bulls are likely relatively happy about today. So now this fade on the backside of that move in comparison, we saw volume tank off. It didn't happen immediately, but it definitely happened. And that makes that previous move even more out of context, right? If the volume had sustained itself to these levels throughout the fade, well then I wouldn't have said what I said about that previous move, because it wouldn't have been, out of what is expected for that time of day or around the surrounding volume bars. So that's what we need to know about that initial move. But what about this kind of afternoon move? This kind of slower, a little bit lazy, but very obvious upside grind that led to consolidation into the close, which, by the way, those of you who followed the original Roensch Capital channel, when this is what that channel was, by the way, back 3 or so years ago, we used to talk a lot about consolidation into the close. I feel the exact same way to this day, right? Nothing has changed. But after you see a big move in your favor, to see strong consolidation, just sideways movement into the close, not a bad thing to see. Okay, but the volume profile of this move here itself, we got a few bars that were outliers, but honestly, I have to remain unbiased. It's just not definitive enough for me to sit there and say, wow, the bulls really clearly won that move. It's just a little sloppy. The price change still occurred, of course. But in terms of volume profile specifically, that second upside push that we got, that obvious move, it's just not quite obvious enough for me to go out of my way to say there's really anything there other than kind of a neutral volume profile with a couple of bullish pops. Okay, so by the way, those of you who get value out of these videos, the original Roensch Capital channel, which by the way used to be this, I have now transitioned it over the last few years to now primarily trading education. It's a slightly different style. I'm on camera and I teach longer trading education like classes. Okay, just for free there on the channel. So if that interests you, I hope you subscribe over there as well. But of course, I'll keep doing my thing here every single day. Now let's move on here to psychological and self-fulfilling prophecy levels that I'm personally going to be paying very close attention to here tomorrow. We of course have the most popular moving averages we could possibly slap on a chart, the 50 period and the 200 period. Now interestingly, in last night's video, because SoundHound won last night's wildcard stock as well, we were talking a lot about this 50 period moving average, how we had more definitively reclaimed that, and it was actually beautiful. And we now today utilize that as kind of a trampoline to help assist in this upside push, of course, along with the news, of course, along with the entire sector. But this has been a great push here today. So listen, tomorrow, bulls, I'm not looking, ideally no retest, because we've now put some distance in between. That would be a relatively large red day. If I'm a bull here tomorrow looking at the 30-minute chart, I want to see that 50 period currently at 632. Just get as high as possible, as quickly as possible, and get some feet up underneath the move. Really important to add some psychological downside barriers as soon as possible when you get a big move in your favor. Bears, ideally you guys would somehow prefer to see a flattening out of that 50 period, understanding it is curling pretty aggressively upside, but any flattening out at all of that 50 period to make it stop reclaiming upside and putting a psychological barrier higher and higher, that would be your best case scenario, aside from, of course, just breaking it clean to the downside on big volume tomorrow. Now, let's move on here to the 4-hour chart and take a look and see if this thing is contextual. And it is. Let's take a look here. You can see we discussed yesterday how we were kind of sitting right on top of that thing. And today, look at this. We downside tested that 50 period here on the 4-hour chart. And similar to the 30-minute, kind of use it as a trampoline to help boost us up with today's move on the sector-wide news, 16% nearly. Now listen, truthfully, the 4-hour chart, this 50 period is going to take time. Bulls, any curl upside, that thing getting above $6 a share tomorrow would be a great sign. But you can't expect this thing to move very quickly, very fast. Bears, you guys just want to see that continue to remain flat below, ideally, that psychological round number of $6 a share for as long as possible. That's what you bears are looking for here. Now, the most important chart of all, that is going to be the daily. We have to take a look at this because this is the most popular chart, the most Psychological, self-fulfilling prophecy chart that the entire world is watching, so we must also pay attention to what's going on here. What's the obvious story? Listen, by the way, if you guys, again, do get value out of this style of video, I think you would also find our private trading room, the Roensch Capital Gold server, extremely valuable. That's where all the real-time discussion happens. Every day, I'm sending out my real-time personal scalp setup alerts that I'm watching. Also, I'm sending out real-time alerts to stocks that are in play, that have a lot of trader interest around the world at that very moment. That's a style of trading that I myself am also very active in. You can take a look at that or potentially join at that link in the pinned comment. But here on the daily chart, what's the obvious story here? Now, again, keep in mind, this is not going to show after hours movement. The stock's currently at 710 after hours. This is just showing the close of 693. But what's the most obvious story here? That's the only story I'm really concerned with. It's the round number of $7 a share, right? When a stock is 6 something, 7 something, 5 something, every round number is a huge psychological level. $7 a share. Remember how we were talking about recently in the latest SoundHound videos, if you caught those, how $6 was huge? Well, $7 is the next big thing here after today's nearly $1 a share move. Massive. Bulls, 2 things I'm looking at here tomorrow. Any retest of $7 a share, because remember, we reclaimed it, but we did so in the after hours on lower volume. We have to take it with a grain of salt. I want to see a definitive intraday reclaim of $7 a share tomorrow, but I'm not talking for 6 minutes. I'm talking about I want to see a lot of time spent above 7 in the intraday with good volume and close above 7. Okay, if we see a punch through 7 or a hold of 7 off the open, a retest of the level on whatever volume, I don't mind, and then a big volume bounce away from $7 a share, that's beautiful. Then I'm looking up towards 750 as that next relevant level. Bears. $7 a share is your enemy right now. You want this to be a $6-something stock, again, ASAP. Get back below 7, whether it's pre-market or intraday, but ideally seeing, again, a lot of intraday movement happening in the 6s with a lot of volume. I don't care if we retest 7, if I'm a bear, right, if that's what I'm looking at. Hard, high volume rejection off 7, closing below 7, heading down, looking towards 650 as that next relevant level. Now, my favorite part of every video here every single day, what was the bias in the options chain here on SoundHound stock? Oh man, this is my first time looking at this. Today, how did the traders position themselves today heading into tomorrow? Well, we have a decent sample size. We can't expect millions on a stock like SoundHound. We have 147,000 total contracts traded. Look at this absolutely bizarre call put ratio. 120,000 calls, 27,000 puts. The overall ratio is very heavily call side biased. Okay, but what's really interesting, look at this. Every delta range, every single one, is leaning call side except for the slightly more undecided 0 to 20. Those are those very short-term speculators on average. In that delta range, we have about 8,000 calls and about 9,400 puts. Okay, not nearly, of course, as overwhelming of a put side bias as the call side bias is on the overall ratio, but a little more undecided with a slight put side bias. Again, the volume is so low, we have to take that with a grain of salt. With the bigger sample size of volume, we do see a really heavy call side bias thanks to those other delta ranges leaning so heavy to the call side. But a very interesting chain here on SOUN today. Listen, if you got value out of this video, please subscribe to the channel. My goal is to hit 5,000 subs by market open this coming Monday. And I think we can do that with your help. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.